Welcome to the TriceraChorus pedal tutorial. My name is Cozzi with Eventide, and in this video we're going to explore the knobs, foot switches and buttons on the front panel and listen to how the parameters relate to each other. Eventide's TriceraChorus pedal was inspired by classic stompbox and rack mount tri-stereo choruses of the 70s and early 80s. Its sound is crafted like a vintage Bucket Brigade chorus, but this time with an infusion of Eventide's legendary micro-pitch detuning. By taking three chorus voices, left, center, and right, and pairing it with detuning of the left and right signals in opposite directions, we get a complex and wide stereo spread. A three-phase LFO modulates the delay times for these voices, producing dazzling movement across the stereo field. The combination of the three modulated delays creates a huge wash of chorus, reminiscent of that big, dreamy 80s sound. Like the mighty three-horn dyno, this pedal is a chorus powerhouse, offering three effect types, complemented by detuning and a stereo phase shifter we call Swirl. For a quintessential vintage chorus sound, set the pedal to chorus mode. If you need something with more complexity and movement, the chorale mode produces lush, heavenly sounds reminiscent of the tri-stereo chorus processors. Vibrato mode gives us more of a warbly, pulsing effect. If we want that famous subtle sweetening, dial in Eventide's micro pitch shift with the Detune knob. To further transform our tone, we can toggle the swirl option to get lost in psychedelic, swooshing, phasing, and univibe style tones. With this combination of tools, TriceraChorus can be used to do things like subtly thicken our sound, create static chorusing, or achieve deep and dizzying swirls of modulation. 5 onboard preset slots allow us to store and recall our favorite settings. Using MIDI over TRS, we can access up to 127 presets. Furthermore, the Eventide Device Manager application makes it easy to audition, customize, and organize them from our computer. TriceraChorus accepts mono or stereo inputs, and with adjustable signal levels, it sounds great on instruments and line-level devices of all types. The pedal consists of 6 knobs, each with 2 levels of control. On the front panel, we have immediate access to the primary controls in white: mix, rate, detune mix, left depth, center depth, and right depth. To access the secondary controls shown in black, press the page button. The lit LED indicates the knobs now control mix envelope, rate envelope, detune pitch, delay, filter, and output level. To return to the primary set of controls, press the page button again. For most of this demo, I'll be connecting my guitar to TriceraChorus in mono, but outputting from the pedal in stereo. Though all the controls work the same way in a mono rig, when connected in stereo, the pedal's attributes render the widest result possible. So I recommend following along on a stereo device to hear the effect's full character. With this in mind, let's take a guided tour of each parameter. The mix knob is divided into 3 effect types: chorus, vibrato, and chorale. The chorus and chorale modes offer dry-wet ranges, but they differ in the way they process audio. By design, each voice on TriceraChorus, left, center, and right, uses a dedicated LFO to modulate a delay at the frequency set by the rate knob. In addition, the left and right modulated voices are -120 degrees and 120 degrees out of phase relative to the center modulation signal, and this combination renders a wonderful chorus sound. When the mix knob is in the chorus range, all 3 voices are affected together, whereas in chorale mode, 2 fixed-rate LFOs, one slow and one fast, are added to the primary LFOs, increasing the complexity of the modulation, producing a richer sound. This emulates the behavior of combining the preset and manual modes on the famous Diatronix tri-stereo chorus processors of the 80s and 90s. To demonstrate the difference between both modes, I've set all the knobs to the middle and removed the detuning, filtering, and delay, so we're just hearing the behavior of the LFOs with the voices. Here's my dry tone. I'll switch between chorus and chorale types. There's two ways to enhance the perceived effect. Number one, we can increase the rate of the LFOs. Or number two, we can add more depth to the voices. Working with depths is more subtle, but more on that later. Chorus mode sounds more like the voices are working uniformly, whereas in chorale mode, we can perceive the layered sound from those additional LFOs, giving the sound an elaborate motion. In the chorus range, we go from fully dry to wet as we sweep the knob clockwise. Also, under the hood, the LFO shapes are triangular when we sweep the knob from fully counterclockwise to about 3/4 of the way up. After that point, the LFO shape morphs gradually from triangular to sinusoidal at its highest point. It's designed this way to emulate how vintage Bucket Brigade choruses behave. When the mix knob is in the middle on the vibrato setting, no dry signal is present. In chorale mode, the LFO shapes are sinusoidal throughout the range of the control, and we go from fully wet to dry as we continue clockwise. In this tutorial, the mix knob will be referred to as the chorus mix knob, to distinguish it from the Detune mix, which we'll talk about later. The rate knob controls the base rate of the chorus modulation from 0.1 to 20 Hz. The knob is tapered in such a way to give us access to lower frequencies along a greater portion of the range. Let's listen to the preset called Warped LP. This basic vibrato setting uses the center voice, and it makes it easy to hear the effect of the rate control. When we add another voice, we can hear the interplay of the voices fill the space wonderfully. In more complex vibrato presets like Route 66, rate plays a pivotal role in giving character to the chorus sound. Lower rate settings tend to sweeten the sound, where higher rate settings can get dissonant and crazy. For fun, let's try some overdrive. Rate is the only control on TriceraChorus that can be controlled by a tap tempo aux switch, or MIDI clock when it's engaged in system settings. When the pedal's EXP input is set to EXP plus aux mode, the auxiliary switch is automatically mapped to control the tap rate of the LFO. The tap switch should be connected to the ring end of a TRS to dual TS cable. Of course, we'll probably have an easier time controlling the LFO rate if we map it to an expression pedal. The good thing about doing so is we can map more than one parameter to morph the sound in more interesting ways. Just set your expression pedal to the min point and set your beginning tap rate, expression pedal to the max point, then your ending tap rate. Be aware that when the pedal is configured to receive MIDI clock, TriceraChorus will pay attention to the clock received via MIDI over TRS, and we can access node subdivisions spread along the range of the rate knob that will sync the LFO to the BPM. I give an in-depth discussion about expression pedals, aux switches, and system settings in part 2 of this tutorial, so I invite you to check that out. TriceraChorus gives us a chorus mode, chorale mode, and has a setting for vibrato. But one of the key processes that sets it apart from other chorus pedals is the Detune section, which uses Eventide's famous micro-pitch shifting. Because the detuners are fed from the stereo mix of all 3 chorus voices, we can use it to add even more width to the signal. Here's a preset called Pascorius that uses subtle chorusing and some detuning to sweeten the sound. Here's my dry signal. As I turn down the detuning, we can perceive less of a modulated effect. The interesting thing about micro-pitch detuning is that it has a static characteristic, meaning it doesn't sound like it's being modulated by an LFO. If I turn down the detuning and raise the depth of both voices instead, now we can perceive more of a traditional effect of the LFOs modulating the chorus voices. We can combine the two for a more unique character. Detune also works with complex signals, like the preset called Tribrato, which is one of my favorites showcasing the chorale type. I'll demonstrate it playing it with Detune all the way down first. We can hear how the detune adds more texture and width over an already elaborate signal. It's important to understand that detuning processes the stereo left and right channels at the same time and is independent of the chorus mix control. This means that even though the mix on either chorus mode is set completely dry, we'll be able to take advantage of detuning as a standalone effect. The secondary control on the detune knob is pitch, and it simultaneously controls the detune amounts for the left and right channels, and in equal pitch increments. When set to the middle, the voices are in unison. I'll start off with chorus mix set to dry, and the detune maxed out, so we can hear pitch taking effect clearly. As we move counterclockwise, the left channel gets pitch shifted down from 0 to minus 40 cents, while the right channel shifts up from 0 to plus 40 cents. Remember, each channel gets an opposing amount of detune. As the left channel gets detuned by minus 30 cents, the right channel goes in the opposite direction, to plus 30 cents. Past the middle, going clockwise, and now it's the left channel that gets pitch shifted up, and the right channel that gets pitch shifted down. If you focus on one side of the stereo field, you can hear how it shifts by up to 80 cents in either direction. Detuning is most effective when the pitch parameter is not set in the middle. Otherwise, if we crank the detune knob with pitch set to unison, we perceive more of a change in width rather than the sweetening characteristic of micro pitch shifting. So let's put the pitch parameter in the middle. On the other hand, if I use any value other than unison, it enhances the effect of the detune control. Using any of the effect types on the chorus mix knob in tandem with detuning can render some beautiful, interesting sounds. The mix knob's secondary parameter is mix envelope, which allows us to use our playing dynamics to modulate the global chorus mix and detune mix amounts simultaneously. The knob is split into two ranges, negative and positive. To demonstrate how mix envelope works, I'll use the preset called Watery Pluck, which features vibrato and detune. If we set the knob in the middle, the envelope is off and will not affect the chorus and detune mix amounts. When we're in the negative range, increased playing volume decreases the mix and detune amounts and gradually brings them back up as the signal decays. The negative range works best when we want the signal to be unaffected by the chorus and detune until its level goes below a certain threshold. We can use it to add clarity to pick attacks or swell the chorus in Detune as notes decay. Turning the mix envelope knob clockwise up to the midpoint will increase the envelope sensitivity to the input. The graphics around the knob indicate the direction of greatest intensity. In other words, higher settings will take the envelope longer to return the mix and detune levels back to normal. In the positive range, the opposite happens. Increased playing volume increases the chorus and detune mix amounts, and gradually decreases these amounts as the signal decays. We can hear how the effect is prominent at first, but reduces in intensity as it rings out. In this case, higher settings will take the mix envelope longer to reduce the chorus and detune mix amounts. It's important to experiment and find the sweet spot. Whether we're using negative or positive envelope ranges, our playing dynamics, and even the types of pickups we're using all affect the way these sensitivity controls respond. Also, depending on the input gain, there will be a portion of the sensitivity ranges that are more effective. Once we find a setting that decays the way we want, we can further adjust other parameters to enhance the effect as it rings out. In this watery pluck preset, I can adjust the depth of the chorus voice to make the effect more prominent throughout the decay as it exists. Even if I remove the chorus altogether, we can hear how it's still controlling the detune. Remember, mix envelope affects both chorus mix and detune mix simultaneously. The rate knob's secondary parameter is the rate envelope. It allows us to use our playing dynamics to modulate the speed of the LFO. Like the mix envelope, this parameter also has positive and negative ranges. I'll use the preset called Syrupy Leslie to demonstrate how the rate envelope affects the LFO. I'll start by exaggerating the rate, and paging over to the secondary set of controls to access the envelope. With the knob set right up the middle, the envelope is off and won't affect the signal. With positive values, the rate increases up to the knob settings the harder we play, and then the rate gradually slows down as the note decays. Higher sensitivity settings will take the envelope longer to reduce the LFO rate. With negative values, the rate of the primary LFOs will be slowed down when you attack the note, gradually returning up to the value set by the rate knob as the note decays. This range can be used to create fade-in, vibrato, and chorusing effects, but higher sensitivity settings will take longer for the envelope to bring the LFO up to the rate settings. One thing to keep in mind is the envelope rate control can change the apparent rate value. For example, with envelope set to off, the rate sounds like this. But if the positive rate envelope sensitivity is set to low, we perceive a completely different rate. My rate could be dimed, but because of the rate envelope, I wouldn't perceive it. If you'll be experimenting with the rate envelope, I recommend setting the sensitivity to off. Then set the LFO rate. Afterwards, go back into the rate envelope and adjust the sensitivity. TriceraChorus has 3 voices, left, center, and right. Each voice uses a dedicated LFO to modulate a delay at the frequency set by the rate knob. The modulated signals for the left and right voices are -120 and 120 degrees out of phase relative to the center modulation signal. As demonstrated in the mix knob section, the result we get from the interplay of these voices differs depending on the effect type we choose, whether it's chorus, vibrato, or chorale. However, there are a few things common to all 3 voices, no matter the effect type. To start, each voice can be turned off by positioning the knob completely counterclockwise. This takes the voice away from the mix and automatically adjusts the levels of the other voices behind the scenes to preserve the wet-dry blend. Another similarity, as we move any knob clockwise, we increase the amount of delay modulation, which in turn creates greater changes in pitch. The similarities end there, especially as it pertains to how voices are positioned in the stereo field. The center voice on TriceraChorus is always panned in the middle. Technically, so are the other voices if we're connecting things in mono. When the pedal is connected in stereo, however, there are 2 variables that determine how the voices get positioned in the image field. First, the mix knob influences the stereo width. On both the chorus and chorale effect types, the point of greatest perceived width is at the midpoint of each range. In other words, as we increase the mix, the voices will start out center focused and gradually spread automatically by the algorithm. Furthermore, as we continue to raise the mix beyond 50%, the voices will once again become more center focused until we get to the vibrato setting, where there's no dry signal. The second variable that determines how voices get panned has to do with which ones are active at any given time. Let's focus on the pan behavior of the voices when mix is in a center position of a range, where the greatest spread is possible. As a starting point, I'm working with preset number 1 called TriceraChorus. I've simply increased the rate a little bit and taken out any detuning or delay. If we're only using the center voice, the dry and modulated signals get panned in the center. If we're only using the left voice, the chorus signal will be routed to the left side and the dry signal will be routed to the right. This is a classic technique for producing a wider stereo image. In fact, this is how vintage chorus pedals behave. Let's try it with some drive. Similarly, if we're only using the right voice, this time the dry signal gets panned to the left and the chorus signal gets panned to the right. If we use the outside voices and keep the center voice off, then each voice gets panned to their respective output. Left voice out of the left channel, right voice out of the right channel. If we use either outside voice alone with the center voice, the signals are panned in such a way to balance the signal across the stereo field. For example, if we use the left and center voices, the signals will get shifted to rebalance the image. If we use all three voices, left goes out of the left output, right goes out of the right, and center is sent to center. Center is sent to both outputs. Let's try this with chorale. For every configuration, we've done extensive work to ensure levels are adjusted under the hood to maintain an even balance between voices. Even if we adjust the mix knob position away from the midpoint toward the center focus extremes, the balancing is adjusted for consistent output. In this tutorial, we've been focusing on a mono to stereo configuration, but we've also ensured proper balancing occurs across all voices in stereo to stereo setups as well. When deciding to add or remove voices on TriceraChorus, there's a few things to keep in mind, like what type of chorus sound are you after? If it's a vintage style chorus, then I recommend using the chorus mode while engaging one of the outside voices, either left or right. By directing your dry signal to one output and the modulated sound to the other, we're following the signal flow of vintage chorus pedals, reminiscent of the CE1. A unique fact about chorus mode is that the LFO shapes are triangular, from a range of fully counterclockwise to about 3/4 of the way up. After that point, the LFO morphs from triangular to sinusoidal at the vibrato setting, to more closely behave like classic chorus pedals. Presets CEO and CFO are great examples. If we want to approximate that Landau tri-stereo chorus sound, definitely use chorale mode and activate 2 to 3 voices. Recall that chorale mode adds 2 fixed-rate LFOs to the primary LFOs, one slow and one fast, creating an effect similar to combining the preset and manual modes on the Ditronix tri-stereo chorus processor. In chorale mode, all LFO shapes are sinusoidal throughout the range of control. It's best to give each voice varying degrees of depth so that the mix of signals will be as layered as possible. The delay parameter on TriceraChorus behaves differently depending on the chorus type we use. When mix is in the chorus mode, delay sets the minimum delay time for all voices, ranging from 0.39 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds. Notice the values along the range of the knob are tapered in such a way to access shorter times more easily. It's important to know that non-zero delay times more closely behave like actual Bucket Brigade-style choruses. Short delays can be used to create light flanging, as is the case with the 4th onboard preset called Slow Flange. Notice if I increase the delay time, it reduces the effect of the flange. Typical chorus delays range from 1.5 to 10 milliseconds. Setting the delay in this range will render more emblematic chorus sounds, like in the preset called CEO. Let's try it with some drive from my Chase Bliss automaton. Raising the delay considerably puts the sound in its own space. Be careful, it may sound detached if we go too far. Adding more voices with distinct modulation depths can fill the space nicely, as is the case with the preset called Crispy Chorus. Notice we have about 9 milliseconds of delay there. We can create a chorus slapback sound using values between 50 and 100 milliseconds. My favorite example of this is the preset called 2 + 3 = 5. Another good example is a preset called Put on ARP. When mixed is in chorale mode, the delay amount for each voice becomes a function of the delay setting and the depth level of each voice. In this case, as you increase the depth of a voice, its delay amount decreases, emulating the behavior of the Ditronic's tri-stereo chorus. Let's listen to the Raven chorus preset to hear this in action. On this preset, the left and right voices are set low, while center is high. The delay setting is a little bit past the middle. If I exaggerate the delay, we can hear the space in there. However, when I raise the depth of the other two voices, we can hear how the delay amount decreases. I'll lower the voice depths again, the delay increases. Let me raise the voice depths again so we can listen to different delay levels. You know there's a difference between chorale and chorus mode because if I go back to chorus mode, we can perceive the space in there. Go back to chorale mode. For me, it seems delay settings within the first half of the range keep the image focused, unless the voice depths are low. If left, center, and right depths are low, then there's a more apparent space at higher delay settings. Using a lot of delay in chorale mode puts the sound in a unique space, somewhere not quite slapback, but fuller than simply layering voices. Because the voice depths play a big role in determining the effect of the delay, this gives us a greater number of tonal possibilities. I want to note that optimal settings, especially with longer delay times in chorale mode, should include a decent amount of dry signal. If mix is beyond 60% in chorale mode, the delay will interfere with playing feel, though it may make for an interesting effect. Delay on TriceraChorus should be used as a tool to add vibe to your chorus tone. Unlike delay on our other .9 pedals, which function more as pre-delay, we can use it on this pedal to nail the chorus texture we're after. The secondary parameter of the center knob is the filter, which is a tone control for shaping the high and low end of the wet signal path out of the chorus section. Setting the knob in the middle is flat, meaning no filtering. Turn the knob to the left to reduce muddiness by rolling off low frequencies with a low-cut filter from open to 1000 Hz. Turn to the right for a softer sound by rolling off high frequencies with a high-cut filter from open to 100 Hz. Keep in mind the tone control only affects the wet signal path. This means if there's any dry signal in the mix, that aspect of the sound will be unaffected by the filter. For example, if I'm using a preset with mix set high in either range, the filter behaves as expected. I'll leave it with a drastic high cut in this example. As I begin to back off on the mix, we hear the dry signal appear. This in turn causes the high frequency portion of the spectrum to return despite the drastic filter cut. This happens because the filter only affects the wet signal. This is another instance where the position of the mix knob will influence the effect of a parameter, in this case, the filter knob. The secondary parameter of the right knob is the output level. Like all .9 series pedals, the output level goes from -18 dB to +9 dB. This parameter can also be mapped to an expression pedal or controlled via MIDI. Output is at unity gain when the knob is in the middle. I recommend using it to optimize the balance between bypass volume and the result of your process signal when activated. TriceraChorus features two foot switches, each with a corresponding LED. The active foot switch serves to engage or bypass the effect. When activated, the corresponding LED will light up. Typically, when an active foot switch is pressed, it latches or remains in a given state until it's pressed again. A cool feature of TriceraChorus is the ability to change the active foot switch from latching to momentary functionality by pressing the LED above it. When set to momentary, the effect is activated if the button is pressed and automatically bypasses when released. The swirl foot switch has two modes, preset select mode and swirl mode. If the LED button above the foot switch is off, we are in preset select mode. Consecutive presses will allow us to serve presets incrementally. Searching past the fifth preset goes back to preset 1. When we land on a preset, the LED on the ladder will blink for 5 seconds. Within that time, press the active foot switch to recall. Upon activating, the LED will turn solid. Otherwise, the preset search will time out and remain on the current settings. By holding down the right foot switch pressed for 2 seconds, we enter swirl mode, and the LED button will either be red or green. Red indicates the foot switch is in swirl mode, but the swirl effect is off. Green indicates swirl is on. Swirl adds another dimension to TriceraChorus' sound via stereo phase shifters after the Detune section to create throbbing and swooshing effects. Here's a few before and after examples. The swirl effect follows the mix envelope control. For example, using the Lush Life preset, we can clearly hear how the mix envelope brings the swirl signal back in. Swirl speed is adjusted by rate, and it follows the rate envelope control as well. Use faster rates to achieve more psychedelic swirl effects. The amount of swirl depends on the greater level of either chorus mix or detune mix. If I reduce the mix and detune of this preset, we go back to having just a dry signal. I can activate swirl, but we won't hear its effect until we raise the mix knob. However, even if we go back to having a dry signal on the mix knob, by adding detune to the signal, we'll be able to perceive the effects from swirl. Because the detune section of the algorithm comes after the chorus mix, and the swirl process happens after the detuning, any amount of chorus or detune will introduce the effects from swirl in the signal. Keep in mind that the character of the tone changes depending on the amount of chorus and or detune we use. And it does the same with swirl engaged. One thing to keep in mind is that it is possible to save the preset with the swirl activated. Also, swirl can be controlled via MIDI using CC number 15. Use values at or above 64 to activate it, and values below 64 to turn it off. Apart from showing which mode you're in, the Swirl LED button also serves to save presets. To save your current settings, press and hold the Swirl LED button. The ladder, active button, and swirl button LEDs will blink. Press and release the Swirl LED button to select the location for your preset from 1 to 5. Press and release the active LED button to save the preset. The LEDs will stop blinking and the current preset LED will stay lit. Please note, save mode times out after a few seconds. Pressing either foot switch also exits save mode. One last note on foot switches and buttons. The pedal will remember the last state of the LED buttons when the pedal is turned off. So it will remember if the active button was in latching or momentary mode, whether the swirl foot switch was in preset select mode or swirl mode, and whether the page button was engaged. So always pay attention to whether it's lit to determine which parameters the knobs are controlling. Though the pedal can only access 5 presets, it can keep up to 127 in its memory. By connecting the pedal via USB to a computer, we can use the Eventide Device Manager application to view, edit, and select presets from a list. We can also program expression ranges and adjust system settings. All the presets highlighted in this tutorial can be found in the pedal's memory, accessible via the preset list on EDM. We can move any presets into or out of our top 5 slots so that they become the pedal's onboard presets. EDM also allows us to create and restore backups of our entire list, and to import and export individual presets to our computer. Please note that if we choose a preset on EDM that is outside of the top 5, the last 2 LEDs on the pedal's preset ladder will be lit. This also happens if we choose a preset via MIDI that is outside of the top 5. It's also important to note that anytime we make an adjustment on the front panel after a preset has been loaded, the preset ladder will blink once, indicating the preset has been modified. At this point, we should save our settings or risk losing them when we move to another preset. Thanks so much for learning about the knobs and switches on the TriceraChorus pedal. I invite you to check out part 2 of this tutorial to learn more about making connections, adjusting system settings, and making the most of the EXP input for expression and MIDI control. My name is Cozzi with Eventide. I hope you have fun experimenting with our .9 family of pedals.